Welcome to Exploring the Arts. I'm Ed Colley, and here we are at the Herd House here in Ipswich. You've probably driven by it many times. It's also known as the Ipswich Museum. We're going to go inside and we're going to meet the curator, Stephanie Gatskin, who's going to show us around this amazing collection. There are paintings in here done of children. There's also a room exclusively exhibiting just Ipswich Artists, and of course, the famous works of Arthur Dowd. So come on, follow me. And watch your step. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Glad to have you here at the museum.
I can hardly wait to see the exhibit. Where do we start?
Well, we'll start in the next room,
Okay.
focusing on the child.
Show me the way.
Okay.
Stephanie, tell us about this painting here.
Okay, this is one of the prized possessions of our museum, actually. It's 3 children who were born here in Ipswich, or not, 2 of them born in Ipswich, and it is the Dawson Children, 3 of them. They are 14 years apart. You wouldn't know it from the picture because they all look about the same size. The important thing about this picture, although it's in quite bad condition, as you can see, is that they added a 3rd child. It's very unusual in paintings of that period to add on something. You'll see there's a line where the 3rd child on the right was added.
Can you show us where the line is?
The line is right up here. So this is a separate canvas going all the way down. And these 2 children, as I said, were painted first, and then the other child painted later when she was born, 14 years later. The 2 girls are dressed quite alike. The dresses are the same. This was done probably by an itinerant painter, and often the bodies were painted first and then the heads were added. The 2nd child on the right has much more character. Her hair is different. You can see it's a different era when it was painted, even though 14 years later it's a different style. The 2 girl and boy on the left are both with very plastered down hair, helmet heads, we like to call them sometimes. And basically the important thing is the fact that it's 2 children with 1 added, that we know who these children are, and that we have a picture of the grown-up children here. So they are Elizabeth, George, and Rebecca Dawson.
Oh, thank you. Let's take a look over here now. Let's go over to this painting.
Okay.
What about this painting here? It's quite different than the one across from the other side of the room.
Quite a bit different, probably a couple of centuries different. And the 2 girls in this are local girls, Alicia and Matilda Hills, and they grew up on Labor and Bain Road in Ipswich. This was painted in their attic, and it was painted by Richard Vanderfield Ellery, who's a Danvers painter. The girls, Alicia told me that when it was painted, it was done in a very cold place, the attic, as I said, and the background is paneling that came from the first Crane estate. So that's, I think, interesting.
You mentioned something else about this painting I thought was kind of interesting. What about the hands of the little girls? I want to hear that story.
Well, you can see they're quite red. And Alicia said that their hands were freezing. That's why they've all turned red, because they had to sit there for so long.
They really don't look very happy.
No, they don't. But they're beautiful little girls. Beautiful. And the outfit is very appropriate for that period of time. And a cat, of course, signifies that it is a girl. Cats are associated with girls. You'll see in other paintings around the room that girls had kitties and boys had horses.
Okay, listen, I see this little boy staring at me through a door. Is he in there for a timeout?
I hope not. That's my father.
Let's go see your dad and see what he's up to. Do you see family resemblances when you look at this portrait?
I mean, I think it looks like some of the little boys in the 60s, you know, some of my children. But we have one grandchild who looks a lot like my father. Not my child, my sister's child.
Now, was he a painter as well?
No.
Okay.
No one is really. I have a couple of kids who like to paint, but there's no one who's doing painting
I think
for a
we should
living.
leave your dad alone behind the door. He's having a timeout. Let's go over here and look at this painting.
You know, okay.
This painting you were telling about earlier is quite unique. And explain the uniqueness of this painting to me, please.
Well, a couple of things are unique about this painting. For a long time, we thought that Lemuel Smith, who his name is on the back of the painting, was the painter. But in fact, Lemuel Smith is the boy. And this is a boy. He's dressed in quite a European costume, unusual for this period, but he did live in the area. His sisters were the Coburn sisters from Ipswich. I mean, his cousin were the Coburn sisters. And Lemuel is indicated again with a hobby horse. And what does he have in his hand but a whip? And that would indicate right away that he's a boy.
Connection to the horse, right?
Yes, it's a whip for the horse, yes.
Why is he wearing a dress?
That was very common in that period of time. Boys wore dresses until they were about 5 years old, and especially when they were dressed up. This boy is dressed in a European costume, which made it a little difficult to identify because we thought it might be a European painting, but it's not.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's move on to some of these other items we have here. This hobby horse and this dollhouse. Tell us about these two items.
Okay, the dollhouse, it belongs again to the museum, and this one is a replica of the Hurd family house in Boston near the State House. So it would be a row house. You're looking at the front of the house here, and you're looking at an almost exact replica, but it's probably the house was bigger. This was made by one of the Farley family, and he was a cousin to the Hurds. He made it for Elsie Hurd, who was the last person to live in this house. So it's been around for a long time. It has been refurbished. So you will notice that some rooms look as if they were put in 1871, and some look like they've been changed in 1951. The colors will tell you the truth. So next to it is a hobby horse that belonged to the Lunt family, and Daniel Lunt, maybe only about 20 years ago, gave us this horse. It's all made of natural materials. It's horsehair is the mane. The skin is cowhide, I guess I would say, and the saddle is leather also. Very old horse. From the date of it, just to make sure I get it right, is 1760. So
that's
quite
in pretty good condition for
it's in very good condition. I don't imagine too many children really rode this horse.
Okay,
It's in such
there's some
good shape.
more items in here I'd like to look at.
Okay.
So let's go down the other end of the room. Stephanie, tell us about, looks like twins in this painting, are they?
They are twins. They are Grace L Perkins and Mabel S Perkins. The painting is done about 1865. Again, we do not know the artist. And this is on loan from the Cape Ann Museum to our show focusing on the child. Again, the dresses are very much like the dresses in on the first painting that we looked at. Puffy sleeves and a big wide necklace. The twins are almost identical, but not. If you look very carefully, you'll notice they look a little bit different.
Where's the cat?
No cat, but flowers and fruit.
All right.
A book. She's an intellectual.
I can't stop my eyes roaming around this room. I'd like to go now to the other side over here. There's a couple of things I'd like to point out. Okay, Stephanie, you brought these two paintings up above the wall here.
Okay, the one on the left is by Joanne Cassi, who took up painting very recently, I think 9 years ago. And she does primitive works using a lot of the buildings around Ipswich, but not putting them in the same order. This one caught my eye because it has children skating on a pond, and it has a couple of houses that I recognize from Ipswich, but the children is really the reason it is in here.
What about the one with the wagon?
Okay, the one on the left is done by Elsie Reinert. Elsie preceded me as the Dow curator at the museum, I've been here since 1990. She was probably 20 years before I was that whole time. The two dolls in the back of the wagon were particularly interesting to me because I knew their names. I knew that they were Jane and Lucinda, but I couldn't remember from what story they came. And they're the dolls who own the house in The Tale of Two Bad Mice by Beatrix Potter.
Oh, great story. So what do you say we go into the other room and look into the Ipswich Artists that you have on exhibit?
Okay.
I'll follow you.
All right.
Stephanie, we're now in the Ipswich room. This is a room that is pretty much filled by local artists, people who lived here in Ipswich.
Right. These are all Ipswich painters, but they're from the beginning of the 1900s, so they're 100 years old, or a little bit less than that. I think the latest painting here is 1960.
Okay.
This is a Henry Kenyon, who was a very good friend of both my grandfather, Francis Henry Richardson, and Arthur Wesley Dow, we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And interestingly enough, this is a painting that he did, a small one, and the house in it is Mrs. Baylor's house. So this is painted by Edna Baylor. They were neighbors. A lot of the artists lived together along the river, and these two did. She survived him, but quite a few years. Henry Kenyon's quite a well-known painter from the early part of the 20th century. He came from Providence, but he moved to Ipswich when Dow came back. He was a very good friend, and he was his wife was godmother to my aunt.
And what about this painting here?
This is a painting that my grandfather did, Francis Henry Richardson, and it's somewhere in Ipswich. I don't really know where it is. It's a farm with a couple of wagon wheels.
Where did he have his art training? Who did he study with?
All of these artists, both Kenyon, Richardson, and Dow, all studied at the Julienne School. They had all kinds of other teachers, but they were together at the Julienne School in Paris. Most of the people who were pursuing art at that time went to Paris.
And this was
they
your
had to
grandfather.
go. This is
You
my
remember him?
No, he died before I was born.
Okay.
Died in 1934.
Okay. Now let's move over to these paintings here.
Okay, this is another one of my grandfather's, and interesting to people in Ipswich. This is an old shot from where I live on County Road looking toward Cable Gardens today, Cable Hospital then, painted in about 1920, right after the hospital was built. You see the outline of the hospital up at the top. Nice little painting, I think.
Yes.
This one is in Gloucester. This is not an Ipswich scene.
Done by Ipswich Artists.
Right, but it's an Ipswich artist. It's done by Carl Nordstrom. He died in the 1960s, so he's quite a bit later than these other artists. And he did lots of paintings along the coast and many in the mountains of New Hampshire. This happens to be on Bearskin Neck.
Okay. Now, before we leave this room, there's one last painting I want you to talk about, and it's this one right over here.
Yeah, the painting was painted in France when he was studying there at the Julienne School. Most of the artists who were studying in France spent their winters in Paris, and in the summertime they either came home to sell their paintings or they went to the country. And this is in the northeastern part of France. On a river, and remember that artists then were looking backwards to things that were changing, and this woman is scrubbing clothes on the sand on the edge of the water to get it clean, if you can imagine.
What are some of the other things we're going to be seeing today in the museum?
We're going to be looking at a collection of Ipswich artists from the turn of the 20th century, so that would be around 1900. We're looking at the artists who all studied together in the Julienne School in Paris, and then we're also looking at some artists who came a little bit later than they do. I think the latest artist died in 1966 in this room. We'll be looking at many landscape paintings because so many of the artists who were painting in Ipswich wanted to commemorate the way it looked here. We have Dow's in this room, and the genesis for the whole idea was the Ipswich Artists at Home and Abroad, the exhibit I did at the Cape Ann Museum in 1993, 21 years ago.